Chalk Talk is brought to you by Isolite, the emergency lighting experts. Stay educated, my friends.
Merry Christmas in July, and what better gift to you than a Chalk Talk with your friends at Isolite. I'm Western Regional Sales Manager Greg Keel, along with Eastern Regional Sales Manager Matt Bird, and thank you for joining us for our July Chalk Talk. As you can see, today's topic, we're going to be focusing on Inverters 101, kind of give you a rundown, a refresher on inverters, but also let you know that we've got you covered all the way up to 33 kVA, and Evan's going to talk about each series and feature set. As always, Evan, our Director of Product Development, is our host, but we also have a new member of the team joining us today. Please give me a warm welcome to Ben Cow. Ben joined us a couple weeks ago. Ben is Sales Support Engineer. He's going to be involved in some of the Chalk Talks, AIA presentations, and technical trainings, along with Matt and myself. So Ben, hopefully you get a chance to meet him. He'll be on the road traveling with some of us. But again, a warm welcome to Ben. And with that, I'll give it off to Evan. Evan, take it away.
Thanks, Greg. It's 153 days until real Christmas for those of you who are keeping track. Just wanted to make sure that we're all keeping our eye on the prize here. As Greg mentioned, we're going to be talking about inverters today. Longtime Chalk Talk listeners will know that this is a course that we gave almost like 3.5 years ago, and that was before we started videotaping things and sort of having our current technology stack for this. And so we've opted to give this presentation again in the doldrums of summer where people are taking vacations. Obviously, people are probably celebrating Christmas in July with their family today, maybe. But we're going to do this in our traditional 3-act play. We're going to start with sort of the technology and background. That's going to be the meat of this presentation, actually. We're going to talk about sort of why inverters work, why they represent sort of a modern way to achieve a life safety system. And then we'll talk about some of the cost benefits of those things. We'll touch on our product line. We'll do that pretty briefly. And then this is really kind of a teaser for a much longer version of this presentation that we give live, that we give via Zoom. We can do it at your office. You can come here. And so I wanted to go over what all of those different training courses and the options were. And then we'll end with our sales support. And then you'll actually get to see Ben because his headshot's on that last slide. It's the first time we've changed it in almost 4 years. So good for us. As always, this is a Chalk Talk. You guys are muted, but please ask questions. If you have something, throw it in the chat, throw it in the Q&A. We'll make sure that we get all those answered before we get off here today. Now, I want to just start by kind of giving the lay of the land about why inverters make sense. And in a longer version of this course, we might go into things like generators, uninterruptible power supplies, and a couple other things. But I really want to just talk about emergency lights, emergency drivers, and inverters, really the trifecta. And this is also kind of why we have credibility when talking about this topic. It's not like we just make inverters and we're trying to convince you that everything else is bad. We actually make all of these different life safety products. And so when we say that inverters make up the most modern and sort of the best way to achieve a code compliant life safety system, it's because we believe that that's true, not because we have nothing else to offer. But just in terms of how these things work, and then we'll get into some of the pros and cons and the issues with these solutions. Emergency lights, I think everyone understands. These are bug eyes. The odds are that probably 75% of you are actually within about 15 feet of these things right now. It's a battery pack that has some LEDs or maybe potentially even older technology lights right on it. It's a total unitary item. It has existed for as long as life safety code has existed. Emergency drivers kind of take the same philosophy. They have batteries, but it ends up being a bring your own LED type solution. So you would stuff one of these things into your fixture. It would act as the battery and do all of the logic interpreting whether there was an emergency or not. And then the LEDs in the architectural light fixture would be the thing that illuminate the space in an emergency. And then the inverter, you can think of it as a big box of batteries. It charges up those batteries when AC power is available, and then it keeps that AC power on when there's an emergency. So these things act, at least philosophically, the same. They're batteries that keep lights on during an emergency, but they do have pros and cons between them. And so when we're talking about emergency lights, Um, the obvious benefit is that it's very simple. Everyone understands this. If an inspector walks in and sees a bunch of emergency lights on the wall, he's going to assume that you've done the math and you have a code compliant system. But they're ugly. We make nicer looking ones, but generally speaking, they don't really match the designed decor of a facility. Even if you're using our concealed emergency lights that can be wallpapered or painted, it's still one more thing on the wall. And so it forms the backbone of some wall acne. And maybe the biggest issue, and the one that we're going to spend our time here today, is these are batteries everywhere solutions. And so when you have a battery in a life safety system, what that means is maintenance. Every place where there's batteries, that part of the system has to be maintained on a monthly basis. Every month, someone has to go and prove that all of the stuff is still connected, the battery is still there, and the system still operates. Once a year, you have to do a full duration test to prove that the batteries still have enough capacity to illuminate the space for the required 90 minutes. Now, people think that self-diagnostics gets you totally away from this obligation. That's not true. There's still a documentation step that's necessary. So even if you have self-diagnostic emergency lights, someone still has to go around every month and then basically say, oh, fixture 102, that one has a green LED, it's good to go. If the fire marshal comes in, he's going to need to see that. Now, the emergency drivers definitely still have that batteries everywhere problem, but it would at least seem to solve our wall acne problem. But in reality, that's not actually true. So these are still batteries everywhere solutions. You're going to have these in, every fifth or sixth fixture. And so all of those different fixtures have to be maintained on a monthly basis. Again, self-diagnostics doesn't get us around that. And because these are meant to mount inside of a fixture, that means that we have to put a little red button and a little red green LED outside of the fixture next to it. If you've ever walked into like a Target or a Walmart and you've looked up the ceiling, you'll see that sea of red dots. So you've taken, your beautiful architectural lights and you've turned them into something that's somewhat non-architectural and non-designed. There are also some compatibility issues to be aware of when you're dealing with emergency drivers. They're a little bit difficult to specify electrically. You actually pick the highest wattage LED driver that is still under the wattage of the fixture. So if you have a 35 watt fixture, you might have a 25 watt LED driver. What that means in practice is you're not going to get full illumination out of the fixture in emergency mode. So you're going to have to rerun those photometrics with the diminished light output. And most manufacturers don't actually publish the IES files for emergency mode. So you're going to have to hand modify those, which can be a little bit tricky. There's also a mechanical compatibility aspect to this that can't be ignored. I don't know what your offices are like where you're sitting right now, but above me, we have some architectural linear fixtures, and there is no place for that emergency driver to actually be installed. They really want to be installed in like a very traditional 2x2 or 2x4 troffer. And so if you don't have that, you end up in this world where you can't mount it in the fixture. You have to remote mount it. There's a lot of wires that can be kind of complicated. And that brings us to the star of today's show. Oh, I almost forgot my frowny face on the emergency driver there. That brings us to our star of today's show, the inverters. Now, these are sort of similar in concept in that there's a big box of batteries here, but their application is very different. Because this is behind the scenes, this actually makes AC power. It's not something that is tailored towards LED lights. And what that means is it's universally compatible. And that's not just with that 2x4 LED troffer. It could be any light type. So, a traditional incandescent, a halogen, high pressure, low pressure sodium. If you've got some fluorescent lamps sticking around, it can do that. But it can do more than just lighting now because it just makes AC power. So all of a sudden, your exit signs now can become a part of that inverter-backed emergency system. Things like exhaust fans can now be a part of that inverter-backed emergency system. And what that does is it really simplifies the management of a system. And so now instead of going and hitting all of these disparate batteries for maintenance purposes, this device is the one throat to choke of the life safety system. So you have to go to one place to maintain your life safety system when you're using an inverter-based system. And even more so when we get into the products, I'll touch on this briefly. the larger inverters are actually capable of maintaining themselves. So they start to go into like this self-documentation mode, not just self-diagnostic mode. And so it really makes for a very managed emergency lighting system. One note, and I wrote the word often here very intentionally, most inverter-based systems are going to require a little bit of additional hardware. Remember, that inverter is just a big box of batteries. And so it doesn't really have anything to say about what the fixtures are going to do in an emergency or determining that there's a localized emergency at some location in a building. The emergency lighting control devices like the ELCD 924, the ELCD 1008, they're really going to be responsible for making the lights operate properly. Smaller inverters have that stuff built in, but as you get to larger inverters, you're going to have to add that hardware. And so the pigs and bunnies version of this is the code compliance can really be automated. That could be as simple as, just reducing the number of points of maintenance. Or when you get into our E3, E3 Mac, and E3 Max range, these devices are capable of doing the documentation of that self-diagnostic test by itself. So you don't have to go visit these things every month. These become very sophisticated. They can also do things like push-based alerts. So the text message can go out to the facilities team if there's something wrong with the system. It's more cost-effective. I'll touch on that in a slide or two. And again, it utilizes the architectural fixtures, but more than just the architectural fixtures, really everything in the building that you want to be a part of the life safety system that takes AC power. Now, the traditional pushback when I throw this slide up is, well, usually if we have an inverter-based system, what we're going to do is we're going to VE that down to an LED driver-based system. And that's really not the right way to go. And so we ran some numbers. And remember, I said there's some weird electrical compatibility stuff with emergency drivers. I've cherry-picked these fixture sizes to make it so that the LED drivers are utilized to the best of their ability. I've listed a couple of our inverters down the left-hand side here. And the way to read this chart is these numbers in the middle represent the crossover point where there's a benefit to going with an emergency driver versus a benefit to going to the inverter. So just very quickly, and you'll have access to these slides. If you look at this number, so assuming that our system, our building has 25 watt fixtures, and we have more than 3 of them as a part of the emergency system, or 3 or more, that means that the E3 Mini 125 watt is going to be less expensive. If you have 2 or less, then the emergency drivers are going to be less expensive. They have the benefit. And if you look at these numbers, they're not huge. It's not like 50 fixtures, 150 fixtures. At the third fixture, that breakover point starts to occur. And that may seem counterintuitive, but in reality, this is where I'm going to deploy what I'm going to describe as my cinnamon toast crunch analogy. I have 2 young kids, and they could eat us out of house and home if all we ate was cinnamon toast crunch. They eat the stuff like it's going out of style. And so I have a Costco membership, and I go buy those things at Costco. And the reason for that is buying the big box and big bag of cinnamon toast crunch is a lot more cost effective on a dollar per cinnamon toast crunch basis than going, for example, to the convenience store down the street where I get a little 8-ounce box. The same is true when you're comparing inverters to the emergency LED drivers. You start to get those economies of scale out of that system as it grows. There's less enclosures, there's less batteries, there are larger batteries. There's a single circuit that's there to sense the power outage. There's a single circuit there that's, charging up those batteries. It's not a step and repeat. It's truly an economy of scale. And so the numbers on the left, they're kind of hard to actually get to those numbers because it's so based off of the options for the inverters. But what you'll end up seeing if you start to chart this out over the entire line is as you get larger and larger inverters, the cost per watt goes down. If I'm going to deploy a system that's based off of emergency LED drivers, I'll never do better than these numbers because it's a step and repeat kind of solution, not a grow into an economy of scale type solution. And so there's really a cap at which those LED drivers start to make sense. And it's a lot earlier than people think it is. Very quickly, before we talk about the training, I do just want to remind everybody about the product line. Today, our product line is kind of divided by size, but I'll tell you right now that one of the things that you're going to see is that this E3 Mini starts to migrate its way north. And then this E3 Max actually starts to migrate its way south a little bit. That's kind of our roadmap for products, but this really goes in terms of complexity, right? The E3 Mini, it's a self-diagnostic device. It's really meant for a couple rooms. It has everything kind of baked into it. It's baby's first inverter. It's the value series. So if you have a small base system or like a retrofit type opportunity, that E3 Mini is going to be appropriate. As you move up in the line, you get to the E3. This is where we start to get into that self documentation, right? So this device is actually capable of both running that self-diagnostic test and then also documenting the results. This is also where you start to get into more options about battery chemistry and integration. The E3X, to be perfectly frank, this is kind of a gap filler. We knew that we had a sort of a problem between this like 550 and where our E3 Mac line starts at 1000. And so this was something that we could deploy quickly. It doesn't have the same self-documentation stuff. It's a self-diagnostic inverter, but it's still kind of all in one. You get breakers, you get dimming integration, you get that field selectable 12277 thing. So it's a good inverter, but it's a gap filler right now. Eventually the E3 Mini is going to solve that problem for us. 1000 above, we get into the big iron of the E3 Mac and the E3 Max. This is the Cadillac of the inverter line. And this is really where we go from pull-based maintenance to push-based maintenance. And so these devices, yes, they run self-diagnostics. Yes, they also document themselves. But in addition to that, with the web monitoring capabilities, it can actually push information out to the facilities team via email or text message to say, proactively, hey, everything is cool. High fives and attaboys all around. Don't worry about me. Or if there is an issue, it can alert the facilities team to what that issue is and what needs to be done in order to resolve it. I mentioned at the beginning that this is kind of a 101 course, but it's actually just a teaser for all of the different courses we offer. And we really have 5 different courses that we're capable of giving. We have on-site courses, which could be design training. That's for you as an agent or for your customers, engineers, architects, lighting designers. It's at our facility in Philadelphia. We'll fill a day with, tours and learning about inverters and some of our other products and how all this stuff fits together. It's really a deep dive into what we do. We also offer inverter startup training. So one of the things that happens when you get to those larger inverters is they're furnished with factory startup. That's something that we generally do. But if you have someone on your team that's a control specialist or maybe an electrician who was an apprentice electrician who moved over to the agency side, we can train them to start up our inverters. And that's a 2-day course. We also offer what I just sort of colloquially call our inverter masterclass. And this is really tailored to whatever you need. I've done it as quick as an hour, and sometimes it can take 2.5 hours. This is where we're capable of going into all sorts of rabbit holes about the integration of lighting controls and the specifics of sort of how architectural lighting control systems can integrate with inverter-based systems and ELCD devices. It's a pretty deep dive, and we can be pretty comprehensive and flexible on exactly what the topics are that are covered. And then we have AIA continuing education courses that we're able to give in person via Zoom or on demand via the continuingarchitect.com. So we have a basics course, which covers why inverters make sense and how they fit into a life safety system. And then we have an advanced course, which talks a little bit more about the integration with lighting controls. And it's more specific about the emergency lighting control devices and how they operate. One quick note before we wrap this up, that inverter startup training, that's not good for someone who's just coming out of college, isn't really comfortable around high voltage AC or DC electronics. That needs to be someone who has a little bit of horsepower because, frankly, inverters can be dangerous once you rip the covers off of them. The battery circuits can be 288 volts DC, and that's a pretty dangerous level. We go up to 480 volts AC. So you really want someone who's comfortable around high voltage electronics, who's done some electronics troubleshooting, who's not scared to get their hands in there and knows how to do that safely. So we have a qualification sheet. If you're interested in that, reach out to Matt and Greg or Ben or myself, and we can kind of work through that and see if it's a good fit for you. But it's not going to be for everyone, and we don't say yes to everyone because we do need to make sure that one, that the inverters are started up right, but also that it's done safely for your employees. With that said, a lot of this information is available online. It looks like Greg's actually posting some stuff over in the chat right now. We have all kinds of additional information. We have marketing assets. We've got spec sheets, drawings, boilerplates. We have all the forms related to the startups. We have guides. We've got stuff for contractors. We have all kinds of assets already available on the web. So go check that out if you want more information. And as always, as a follow-up to this, you're going to get a video of me giving the presentation, as well as the slides if you want to give this presentation to your kids to put them asleep. We'll also send out a few of those sales sheets and marketing assets so that you have them for your websites and for whatever you want to do with them. This slide has changed for the first time in 4 years. Say hi to Ben. Greg introduced him at the beginning. I think next month you might hear him talking a little bit on the Chalk Talk, but we certainly recognize that you guys are out there fighting the good fight for us. And so if we can support you in any way, shape, or form, whether it's any of those inverter-based courses we just talked about or any other training that you need, please don't hesitate to reach out to Ben, Greg, Matt, or myself. We'd be happy to support you in any way possible. With that said, Merry Christmas in July. It's 153 days till the real thing. If you guys have any questions, I'd be happy to stick around and answer them now. Thank you all. Enjoy the rest of your day, your week, and we will see you next month.